and welcome to this week's Cats Whiskers TV. No Aaron this week, unfortunately, so Andy Haywood will be joining us. Me and him will be looking back on Panthers games over this weekend, which weren't very good to say the least. We'll also have a look at one or two of the other Elite League games that took place. Our two hot topics this week are Paul Thompson's comments in the recent interview on British hockey, and also the conference system. Is it going to stay in place for next season? Finally, we'll look ahead to some of the games that are coming up this week. But first, it's Paul Baum with the CWTV News.
I'm Paul Baum, and this is the CWTV News. Steelers return to Sheffield after winning Nottingham. Rehearsals for Matt Nickerson's beard shave are going well. And finally, there's some good news for Panthers fans. And that was the CWTV News.
Paul with the news there, and Andy joins me to look back on a pretty disastrous weekend for the Panthers, I think it has to be said.
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't the best of weekends, was it?
We'll start with the Sheffield game, and it seemed to start okay, really. 2-0 up after a few minutes, and then it went drastically wrong from there.
Yeah, I mean, the first 10 minutes we played really good hockey. We were aggressive on the forecheck, we were physical, we weren't backing down from anything. Obviously, with a lot was said about Henley not being on the ice, whether anything would come of that. And I thought for the first 10 minutes, the best part of it, I thought we held our own, and obviously the first goal was really good to get, and it was really well worked. And Clark's second goal, I don't think I've seen a shot hit harder than that other than Boynton.
I don't think there's many netminders in the world who would actually stop that, because it was so accurate.
Absolutely. I don't know how he gets it so hard and so accurate, because surely one would have to relinquish either the accuracy, but it was absolutely pinpoint, and Doyle had no chance. So after 10 minutes, 2-0 up, and the way we were playing, it was looking pretty good. But pretty much after the Clark goal, Sheffield had a couple of good shifts, started clawing themselves back into it, and then just intensity and everything else just seemed to lack. I mean, there was a lot of scrums around the netminders and stuff, and everyone was saying, "Oh, we weren't particularly bullied because we were always involved in those." But some of the little things that happened that I personally thought the hit from Drew Fatter was clean on Jacina, but it left him hurt. It left him hurt. He was haunched. He was on the ice. He skated off on being helped off the ice by a teammate. And the only person that went over to Drew Fatter was Robert Lakovic. Now, fair play to him, but he went over and just sort of, what can he do? And that, unfortunately, sort of set the tone, I think. And although, obviously, we were drastically outplayed, especially the second and third period, I just think little things like that, just, you don't necessarily have to send a guy out and, to beat Fatter up. Just send a guy out and throw a hit. I don't think we threw a hit for the rest of the game after that, and that was a real disappointing thing for me.
Obviously, second, third period, it was like the Alamo at times. It was almost as if Sheffield had a constant power play for 2 periods. They were just completely in control of that game, and being outshot 47-17 at home. I've not seen domination like that since a couple of weeks ago against Belfast, really. But that's got to be a worry that we're being so emphatically outshot and dominated on our home ice.
Absolutely. I made a point during the Belfast weekend that it was like the ice was tilted, but this was far worse. And let's face it, Belfast are the best team in the league by a long way. Sheffield are a good team, but I personally don't think they're any better than we are. And they absolutely dominated us. And the worry is, obviously, a lot is made of the whole playoffs at Nottingham. It's our home game. Belfast and Sheffield have proved that it's easy to come here and absolutely dominate a team. And the main sort of strange thing is the fact that for the past 3-4 years, it's been the other way around. We've probably lost games like 3-2 in overtime or 3-2 on penalty shots where we've outshot them 47-17 and really dominated teams. But it is a worry, certainly, that the home form is now starting to dip, because that was always something we could cling on to, was the fact that our home form was so good.
Of course, it still went to penalties. I mean, I think we have to pay tribute to Craig Kowalski, who was absolutely incredible on Saturday night, and really, thanks to him, it was that the score wasn't a landslide.
Absolutely, he's the best I've ever seen. I mean, I've been going 13 years. I saw the last 2 years of the ISL. So obviously those years I wouldn't have understood the game. I was only about 10 as well. But he's something else. Consistently, he is so good. And you look at some of the netminders that have been brought in, like Lehman, he was very good. Koenig when he was at Newcastle and then at Coventry, very, very good. I mean, but they were all sort of almost easy to put off as well. Whereas K-Wall will have bad games, but it's not like one team like works him out. And I think you look at the way that we've been dominated in the Belfast series for doubleheader a couple of weeks ago, and obviously Saturday night at Sheffield. You know, these are teams that we've played a lot, and these are teams that have got similar players to who they had last year. And this is a goalie that's been with us for 3 years now, and they still can't work him out. I mean, literally 10, 15 of the saves at least that he made on Saturday were world beaters, and it's a true testament to the fact that why he's so good and why we keep asking for him back.
And of course, it also shows that how much we missed him while he was out injured. But yeah, penalty shots came. Maxime Lacroix with an absolutely beautiful move to score, and they won. I'm surprised he didn't wheel out the Stanley Cup at the end with some of the celebrations from Sheffield afterwards and their fans.
It's always one of them things. For the team that loses, it looks silly, it looks over the top, it looks a little bit pathetic. But by the same token, it shows how much it means to them. Especially when you consider that going into that game, we'd beaten them. I think it was 5 times in a row. Well, I mean, we've played them 400 times this year, so we were always going to win a couple. But obviously, we had the same with Coventry a few months ago and a few years ago. That time when they were in a real slump against us, and they beat us at home. I think Dan Green was in goal. They won 7-6. The celebrations were absolutely miles over the top. But it shows how much they care. It shows how much it means to them. And you know, again, it goes back to the whole playoff argument of the whole beating Panthers at home is a big deal these days because of how good we've been.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll move on to Sunday night now. Sunday night, a long trip up to Dundee. Seem to be carrying a lot of injuries. There were reports that Lynn Loynes, Robert Farmer and Matt Francis wouldn't play because of injuries picked up on Saturday night. They all iced, although I didn't see Loynes get more than a couple of shifts. And Dundee, who have their own injury problems, 12 skaters, again, dominated us, completely and utterly dominated us for 60 minutes. Brilliant performance, scored some fantastic goals, and they come away with a 4-1 victory.
Yeah, I didn't get to see it, or didn't particularly follow it on Twitter. I saw obviously the result and stuff, but one thing that really stands out is the overall reaction. I appreciate that the performance wasn't good from what everyone's been saying. We were dominated for 60 minutes, but at the same time, this is a team that are 4th in the league, 1st in the conference, and they are a good side. And let's take nothing away from Dundee. That being said, you would expect Panthers to put on a better performance, but it's
well, considering it was 16 skaters against 12, you know, I must admit I was worried. I thought that Dundee might win. When I saw the relative bench strengths, I thought to myself, well, you know, we should come away with the points here, but obviously wasn't to be.
I think ultimately you go into these games with the chance that you might not pick up any points, but you go into the games confident that we should be able to pick up points. And I think that's what's most disappointing, is the fact that everybody from, I would imagine, the team down to us, the fans, would have expected to go to Dundee and be able to pick up points. The performance obviously told us otherwise, and it's a worry because it's 2 bad performances in a row now.
And it's also a shame because it undoes the hard work that's gone on before, and I think we'd have 5 wins on the bounce coming into the game against Sheffield on Saturday. So all that momentum is gone. 2 very bad performances, and of course there has been some incredibly ridiculous overreactions I've seen on the forums. Yeah. But all in all, understandably the fans aren't happy because of two poor performances, which is to be expected. However, you then look at the games that are coming up and you start to worry.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been the story of our season. You look promising for 1 week, even if you end up our away form's been pretty bad this year. But even games where you've played quite well and lost out, or we've won heavily at home and stuff like that, there's always been that one game where it's all gone starting from scratch again, and it's like you say, it's a worry with the schedule coming up. There's not long left. I think we've only got 4 home games left until the playoffs, and with performances like that, who's to say we'll make it?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at a couple of the other results, and I think one to pick out was Fife against Belfast on Saturday night, where Belfast winning 4-3 in overtime, but Fife 2-0 up. They're really scrapping for that final playoff spot.
Absolutely, and why shouldn't they? I mean, they made it last year, and obviously, whenever we play Fife, I get reminded how they were cheated out of beating us. And they are a great team, especially at home. They come with spoiling tactics when they play away, especially down in our conference. And by the best part, it works for so long. It's just the general build-up of momentum that the other team generates that breaks them down. But I mean, at home especially, it's such a tough place to go. I mean, going back to last year with the playoffs, they beat us 4-2 with a team that you would put down to beat anybody at any time, whenever they wanted. And it shows the true grit and determination that they have at that club. It's brilliant to see.
Another great result last night as well, with Edinburgh beating Braehead 2-0, and which I believe is, I think I saw Edinburgh's first shutout since 2008. So that's, considering they're already out of the playoffs, they've got absolutely nothing to play for. That's a lot of credit to Edinburgh to come away with a victory like that.
Absolutely, and it shows the good work that the conference system does, in the sense that it creates these rivalries that, yes, they may not have made the playoffs, but they don't want to lose to another Scottish team. They don't want to, be seen as the whipping boys every year, and if they get that opportunity, and you look at some of the passion of some of the players, whether it be right or wrong, but especially the goalie, Hiedlowski, you see some of the ways that he reacts to things. It shows he cares, and I'm happy for them, especially for him, because he's had some real bad luck at times, and he has hardly any help from his defence on numerous occasions, game in, game out. So for them to get a shutout, like you say, for the first one in 6 years or whatever it is, it's really good to see, and hopefully it's a sign of things to come.
Quick prediction from you before we sign off this segment. Are Fife going to make the playoffs?
Yes.
There you go. You heard it from him. 2 hot topics this week. We'll have a look at Paul Thompson's comments in an interview with Craig Summerton a little later. But first, the possibility that the conference system may be changing, going back to 3 home, 3 away against everybody, as mistakenly revealed, I think, by the Cardiff Devils this week before being rapidly deleted. But, it's a possibility. Do you think it's the right choice?
If it was after last season, no. This season, I think the way that the fixtures have fallen, I don't think that helps. Because to be quite honest, I'm getting sick of seeing that it's Panthers Sheffield.
No more. That's it now, hopefully.
But obviously, if they were spread out more throughout the season, you could argue that you wouldn't really notice quite so much. We've had, 5 games in 6 weeks,
yeah.
Which is too much.
Is that a case of scheduling, though, rather than a fault of the conference system?
I think possibly yes. Like I say, after last season, you could argue that everything was perfect. It worked well. Everything went well on that side of things, and whether it is a case of that the scheduling hasn't worked this season as well as possible. But ultimately, I think a lot of people are getting cheesed off with it and seeing the same people, the same faces, the same sort of non-event matches, because they're just becoming dead rubbers, because we're bored.
Of course, the other argument is that the conference system has led to a lot closer games and has probably been better for the so-called lower teams, but they've certainly bridged the gap this season, albeit probably not to Belfast, who've run away with it. But if you look at the table between 2nd and 9th, there's 10 points separating them. Surely that's a good thing.
Well, it is, and anything that can be done to bring it closer together is, should be applauded. But by the same token, I really don't see the point of, because you're talking about the lesser teams, sort of mainly. I'm guessing you're saying the Scottish teams. You leave it to me to drop myself in it with that, won't you? But yeah, and Hull. Hello, Sam. But they're the ones who are going to suffer because they've got all these close games. They've got games with teams that are close to them. Your Fifes, your Dundees, Edinburgh. They're all close. I mean, how many did we take to Dundee? How many fans went to Dundee last night? Was it 16?
16, I think.
Yeah. So you say that game replaces a game against Fife, let's say. They're not going to take 16, are they? So Dundee are going to be the ones missing out. But I just think if you're playing 3 and 3, whether they're in the conference or not, it sort of defeats the object of having a conference anyway. All it's going to do is artificially skew the playoff quarterfinals seedings. That's the word.
A couple of tweets that we had in. Alistair Neal, he says it's all to suit the big teams who have been surprised by Dundee and Braehead being above them. Now, that's probably an understandable opinion from a fan of the Scottish teams, but I really can't see that, to be honest.
It's the first I've heard of anything like that. It's one of them things. Obviously, the powers that be that run the league are always seen to be the guys with the big money and the big teams. But I don't think that's true. I think, if anything, as much as it might put a few noses out of joint within the management structure and the chairmans, it's better for the league that they're above us by a long way. Long may it continue.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pleasantly surprised this season with how much closer the games against your likes of Hull, especially Dundee, who've been fantastic this season. I mean, they're 3rd in the league. They've had a brilliant season. I've been surprised at how close those games have been, and they've more often than not beaten us. And it just goes to show how the conference system has been successful. And I really, really think it is a daft idea to change it, with perhaps the exception of Hull, who have an awful lot of travelling to do.
They're the ones, we've said it before, they're the ones who are suffering in this because of the amount of travelling they do. And, I think we talked about it when we were talking about webcasts.
Yeah.
And, that's helped them. But, yeah, I mean, all right, but the travelling, that's what can do you just slogging up and down that A1 week in, week out. It's not going to help.
A couple of other tweets that are in favour. We've got Tom Middleton. He says, great decision. Still gives the two conferences a trophy to fight for, plus the league as a whole is technically fairer. I suppose
fairer. I don't get what he means.
I suppose he means that instead of playing 4 times against a team in your own conference, only 2 against the teams in the other conference, you're playing 3 and 3. So you're playing the same teams the same number of times.
Yeah. The biggest problem with that is you are still bridging that gap between the so-called better teams and the lesser teams. If you do that, you'd not helping the situation. At the end of the day, you're put into a conference based on your supposed ability and sort of geographical position. I think, if anything, that's fairer than saying that we all play each other the same amount of times, because it's not giving these teams to compete on a level playing field with people of their own sort of standard and structure. Because structure is one of the key words as well, in the sense that you look at someone like Fife and Dundee, who are still relatively new to this league. They are still, they've been around it for a few years now, don't get me wrong. But they've spent a lot of the time in the BNL before that, when yes, they'd have got decent crowds, but they perhaps wouldn't have got as good crowds as they are getting sort of in the past couple of years.
I mean, you think back to when the conferences were first announced before the start of last season, everybody said Bray would walk it because they got an easier draw. So maybe going back to where we were is fairer. There's arguments either way. They're both wrong, but there's arguments either way.
Another tweet that alludes to what we were saying earlier from Rubber Puck says anything that means we don't play Steelers a ridiculous amount of times is better than what we've got.
Go on, read the rest of it.
I'm not reading the rest of it. I am not reading the rest of it.
He said he can't afford the jabs.
Yeah. Complain to him, not us. We didn't write that. Okay, I think we'll move quickly on to Paul Thompson. An interview he did with Craig Summerton, who's known as Block 15 Blaze. Very, very good interview, actually, with Tomo talking about his time in Sweden. But a lot of opinions about what he considers the state of British hockey, and he was saying things like cutting the import level down to 6, more ice time for juniors. I mean, you both read the interview, so what are your overall impressions of it? I'll come to you first, Andy.
It's always a difficult subject because everybody's got such different opinions on it. You'll have people that say, the EPL hockey's better because it's all Brits with 3 imports. You'll have people saying there should be no import limit. If you can afford it, you should go out and buy it. But there has to be a middle ground. I think 6 imports might help GB get to the Olympics in 20 years' time, but is it worth the problems that it would create now to get to that stage when you consider that we weren't that far off getting off to the Olympics this time, like in more recent times?
With Paul Thompson as the coach.
Absolutely. I think ultimately what we kind of have to remember while reading this interview is he's coaching in Sweden. They've always been pretty good at hockey. They have exceptionally cold winters so that they can skate whenever the hell they want, for as long as they want. I do agree with what he says about the ice time when he talks about his lad. Ice time is ridiculous over here. It's so hard to get hold of. Obviously,
well, we know
through rec hockey.
Yeah.
But I was talking to friends who've got kids in the junior system and stuff, and the gap between some of the kids, what the ice time that they get, and some of the others is ridiculous, and it's not fair. And ultimately, he has a point there, and I think, to be fair, he probably has a point in all of it. But if you dropped the import down to 6 and you did it so drastic, like he says, and do it so quickly, ultimately it's going to tarnish the league, its quality for a while, and you're going to get dwindling fan bases. And one thing I thought was interesting in reading it was when he talked about the British players themselves, the British professionals, when he was saying about how they will go to the gym for an hour and a half and they think that's it, that's done, whereas in Sweden it's different. Well, surely that's down to the players. That's not down to how many imports are in the league. That's down to the players themselves. If they want to get better and if they want to play at these things, they have to take it more seriously. And yes, that can be instilled into them through junior rankings and through junior systems, and it can be taught to them. But ultimately, these guys are being paid a lot of money to play hockey in comparison to someone like my wages, that's for sure. And if they want to be taken seriously and they want to be taken professionally and go places, they have to put the effort in. And I think ultimately, that's where the issue might lie, not down to the fact that there's 4 more imports than Paul Thompson wants.
Paul,
is there anything else to say? It's easy to be in a position like he's in. I mean, on one level, he's in a fairly unique position. He's seen both sides of the coin, but it's also easy for him to sit there and say, "Yeah, this is what we should have been doing all along." But isn't it what he should have been doing as well? If he's saying, these things, cut the imports, shouldn't he have been campaigning for that when he was here? Because I don't remember him doing it.
True. And I suppose to look at to play devil's advocate a bit. In the Olympics, we had Slovenia, who did exceptionally well, got to the quarterfinals with a country that's, I think, got 7 ice rinks and only 140 registered players, and they're reaching the quarterfinals of the Olympics. And I suppose you've got to look at that and say, well, if they can do it, surely we can do it.
It's a long-term solution. Sorry,
Yeah.
it's a long-term solution though, and this is British ice hockey. We don't do long-term solutions.
Yeah.
We do short, sharp fixes.
True, that's very
Plastering
true.
over cracks. I said cracks constantly.
The other issue is as well, and it may only be the one person or the odd one person, but all the teams in the Olympics had at least one NHL player in them, or former NHL player, and that helps. Ultimately, you look at the Slovenians. Yes, they were very good, and yes, they were brilliant. But a lot of it is always centred around Anzi Kopitar, who plays for LA, and that's because of what he is. It's the same with Norway with Zuccarello, and Latvia with Ozolins, who used to play in the show and stuff like that. They have these players, and you look at your superpowers like your Russias and your Canadas and your Swedens and stuff, where they're predominantly NHL players, but you look at the teams like Austria and Norway and Slovenia. Yes, they've got a hell of a lot of better homegrown players than what we have, but they also have these special superstar talents that then help when they play for their national team, because they make everybody else that little bit better, because they are these uniquely gifted talented.
So what's the answer? Is it a case of more ice time for junior players, or is it dropping the imports? What do we do?
I think it's probably a bit of both, but you can't do it all at once. We need, in an ideal world, we need to increase the ice time for the juniors. But how do you do that with somewhere like that, where you've got how many teams did we count?
Well, we counted
Panthers,
Lions, all the junior teams down.
Four university teams. Vipers,
the women's team, 3 rec teams. Then the figure skaters, then the speed skaters.
General skating sessions, because people have got to get into it somehow.
Yeah.
It's not easy. It's
You skate UKs and you're learning and stuff. Obviously, they've all got to get there. And the other thing as well, but something that's very rarely touched upon, is how much it costs.
Yeah.
It is very expensive. You have 2 kids who want to play hockey. It's a hell of a lot of money to invest.
Yeah.
And and obviously, yes, it may be the same prices for the top brand stuff in Sweden, but it's a lot more readily available, because it's more of a national sport over there.
And you can probably skate outside there, which you can't do here, unless it's under exceptional circumstances.
I mean, I think, going back to what I was saying though, basically, we've got to bring the British talent on. That's a given. We should be doing that anyway. But it's only when we start to reap the dividends of that. Can we start lowering the number of imports? We just lower the number of imports like that tomorrow and expect something to come and fill. We end up going nowhere.
It's no short-term fix. Like I say, if it was as drastic as Paul was saying, and he said I'd drop it to 6 imports, and he wanted it from next season, we wouldn't make the Olympics for the next 12, 16 years, ultimately. And that's... Yes, that's something to work on, and is to work for a long-term solution as opposed to a short-term fix. But by the same token, with things like that, when it is so drastic, you expect a short-term fix because of the amount of how drastic it is, and it won't happen.
I think it's good in a way that someone, such a high-profile figure from British hockey, has actually, at least he's created the debate, and people will start talking about it, because I've seen it on all the forums. It's been mentioned, and it's got people talking about it, which can only be good. We've got a tweet here from Richard Martin, who says he agrees with what Paul Thompson says. He says he's tweeted before about reducing imports to improve British players. We will never be Olympians again otherwise, and I think that's right. Well, you said it's probably a 20-year thing, but I think you've got to reduce the imports gradually. You can't go from 11 to 6 overnight. It just destroy the product. Plus, you haven't got the quality of British players there to replace them.
The other thing to touch on is the fact that the pool of British players that we got on already are... Obviously, I don't know the ins and outs, but I would imagine they are, especially your top-end Brits, will be the highest paid players on the team. You then drop the import level down to 6, and all of a sudden their eyes light up again and say, well, here we go, boys, it's a payday again.
I mean, they're already in a market where their talents are to an extent overvalued, because there's a very small pool, so they can, and they know people want them, so they can inflate their wages, and you increase the importance of those. Yeah, they're going to be rubbing their hands.
That's not their fault, by the way, because I'd be all over it as well. But obviously it's something that has to be addressed by the clubs if they are to look into this seriously, because invariably it will happen.
Just think, Jason Hewitt, the Wayne Rooney of British ice hockey.
Oh, what perish of the thought. I think we'll leave it there, and thanks very much for sending your tweets in once again. Going to finish the show by looking ahead to a couple of the games coming up over the next week. Cardiff on Tuesday night. This show will probably be out sometime Tuesday, so by the time it comes out, it may be out Wednesday. So, good win! Broke the duck, or well, it continues.
The way we've been playing, it's going to be the second one. Isn't it?
So we will skip ahead to the weekend. Panthers with an away game against Braehead. That's not an ideal time to go to Braehead at the minute.
Yeah, nice and easy game to get us back on track, eh? Yeah, that's going to be a tough one, absolutely. They're going to be smarting from being shut out by Edinburgh, because no one wants the stat of being shut out by Edinburgh after so long, when it's been 6 years or however long it was. That's nothing against Edinburgh by any stretch, but that's going to smart Braehead. And they're going to be up for it. Obviously, they don't particularly like us. From what I read anyway. So that's going to be very tough, absolutely. We've got one hell of a weekend.
And of course on Sunday night, live on Premier Sports, it's the Fife Flyers who are desperately clawing for a playoff place and have been in absolutely incredible form. So there is a team. If there was a team you really didn't want to play at the moment, it would be the Fife Flyers.
And it's on telly. Have we won on telly yet this season?
We have not.
That's it. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. I don't think it's going to end well.
Oh dear.
As much as I was criticising how boring it's been, I'd far rather be playing Sheffield this weekend again.
Of course, Fife just on Saturday night will be playing Edinburgh at 5. So you've as good as Edinburgh's result against Braehead has been, you've got to expect Fife to win their home game against Edinburgh, and which will mean they're coming into the NIC with so much confidence.
Absolutely. If I was a betting man, I wouldn't put anything other than a 5 win on that. Whether it will be close or not remains to be seen, but I would imagine with the great atmosphere that they get there, added to the fact that this is a game that they need to win, I can't see anything other than 5 winning on Saturday. And
when you think about Cardiff's schedule coming up, Cardiff have got us to play Tuesday night, and then they've got a game. Then they've got a game against Belfast, and then a game against Coventry. They sort of seem to be going the other way lately after having an upturn in form. They're going to be worried.
Didn't I say Fife would make it?
You did. So,
did I? I couldn't remember.
I think you did actually.
I think I did. I think well, we said last week, that Cardiff are going to be looking over the shoulder now. They'll be able to feel Fife's breath on the back of their neck now, and they'll be worried.
I personally think after the weekend they'll be seeing Fife ahead of them.
To be brutally honest as well, I don't think Coventry are safe.
No, I agree.
And they're another one where they'll need to start getting a run together and getting some results, because it only takes one bad weekend and all of a sudden you drop in 1 or 2 places down the league table and someone's coming up, and it becomes an uphill struggle from there because the games are running out.
And then I suppose Hull are in the equation as well, because they're actually running out of games. I think they've only got 5 games left. Wow. And then 12th of March, you've got Hull against Fife at Hull Arena. It's okay, we'll probably look at more next week, but that's going to be a massive, massive game as far as playoff qualification goes. So, I think Fife will be in them quarterfinals. I think 4 weeks back we was looking at them; they were 10 points behind, and now they look like
they look like a great playoff team as well, in the sense that they've got that physical grinding out edge where backs against the wall, but let's really, let's show them that we want to be here. Let's show them what we can do, and I think ultimately that will see them over the edge.
It's almost that they've got nothing to lose, and they're going to go into that last, possibly that last slot, get Belfast. Everybody's going to expect Belfast to beat them. So they nearly did it last year, remember?
Yeah,
as well.
True. They nearly turned us over.
They were cheated out of it, remember?
Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. we will leave it there. Okay, Andy, thanks for joining us and taking Aaron's place. Aaron will be back next week, as will be Paul. Thanks for joining us once again. We will see you next week.